Eli Ricks has become my favorite boomer bust prospect in this draft, full stop. Why? Well, that's what I'm here to tell you. For those of you who don't know him, Eli Ricks is a cornerback from Alabama that played on the other side from the ever-famous Kool-Aid McKinstry, and he actually committed to LSU originally and played there for 3 years, including redshirting his true freshman year, but he ended up transferring to Alabama before the season after being injured almost all of last year. I needed to watch all of one game from his redshirt freshman year to know immediately that he has some insane upside that, if tapped into, could probably make him one of the top corners in the league. So I really want to try to explain that to you guys as thoroughly as possible, so I'm not going to waste any more time and let's jump right into it. When you watch Ricks on tape, you're going to see him in press most of the time. In fact, it becomes really obvious really quickly that press is definitely his comfort zone. His reactions to wide receivers' routes and different changes of direction by wide receivers mid-route are really fluid on tape. I mean, he really turns and burns with receivers really effectively in press, and when watching him, it really pops out at you. His real strength and specialty is bumping or punching receivers at the line and then staying really close to them throughout the route. When people talk about rerouting receivers in the clipping zone, this type of stuff is what they're referring to. Ricks' press technique is phenomenal. He is really able to get into receivers' comfort zones and disrupt the entire route. When watching on film, the abundance of times where routes just disappear immediately when he's able to hit the receiver at the line of scrimmage is just incredible. As far as big strengths of his that add to that boomer bust kind of aura, one really clear one is his pure aggression and just anger, it seems like, when the ball approaches him. The ferocity he shows when attacking the ball in the air and when a ball carrier approaches him is clear as day when watching, and it's honestly kind of special to see that kind of aggression from a corner nowadays. If you take a look at my notes from the games that I've charted of his, what you'll see is just a bunch of lines saying, "Dude's aggressive AF," and he does not like to be blocked. I mean, those are direct quotes from my notebook on this dude, and it's really clear on tape. As far as his strengths are concerned, though, there are many more that we could talk about and a few more that I will introduce to you guys later, but I would like to get into the first play from a few I would like to examine more in depth just to kind of show you the whole package that is Eli Ricks. The first play I would like to show you guys is from his redshirt freshman year at LSU against Mississippi State. Situation-wise here, Mississippi State is up 10 points with 12:26 left in the fourth quarter, and it's the 2nd and 4 from Mississippi State's own 17-yard line. Looking at this play here from the start, Ricks is down here in press at the bottom of your screen, and the Bulldogs are in a spread look here, and LSU is in a pretty ambiguous look coming out with what looks like cover 5 immediately, but could also very easily become something completely different very quickly. This look does actually become something different with the deep safety to the field side rolling back to make this cover 1 rat, and the Bulldogs end up running 4 verts at it. Now what's good to remember here is that in cover 1, the outside corners essentially have no help over the top from the safety, if the inside receivers from both sides also run vertical routes, which obviously happens here since this is 4 verts. So that's just something to keep in the back of your mind as you're watching this. Another thing to keep in mind is that Mississippi State, up until this point in the game, have run 2 routes at Eli Ricks: fades and drags, and he's barely been targeted up to this point as well, but the main thing to note is that Ricks is expecting that fade or drag to come here. Now, as I said before, Ricks loves to play from a press alignment and loves to jam receivers at the line of scrimmage, so he plays press from a very specific stance and very specific alignment. If you look at him here, he's very square and head up to his receiver, without leverage to any specific side, which isn't normal for when you play man-to-man on the outside in cover 1. It's actually quite common to see in this situation corners playing with inside leverage since they know they have help from the sideline on anything breaking to the outside, and they could also bump and reroute that route towards the sideline if they're on the inside, as well as not being liable to give up the quick and inside route. Now what comes alongside that head-up alignment is the position of his hands. This is something you'll see from every press coverage snap he'll take, and he has his hands up and already kind of resting his elbows on his knees, and that's something that most corners don't do. Usually you'll see the corner's hands in what's called the holsters, at least that's what I know it as, which is each hand on each adjacent hip, or you'll see them kind of dangling in front of the corner's body. Now Ricks plays from this kind of stance because it usually helps him be able to get his hands on the receiver in front of him much quicker than that receiver can swat them away. That is usually. In this case, however, the receiver is actually going to swat Ricks' hands away. Now before watching Ricks, I was watching Joey Porter Jr., who is considered by most to be a better prospect than Ricks, but one of the main flaws in his game was when his hands were swatted away when trying to bump and press, he would lose positioning and thus lose the rep versus the receiver. Ricks, on the other hand, responds extremely well to having his hands displaced from the receiver. Here, he turns with the receiver and runs the fade ball stride for stride with him. This is another huge part of his game that's really underappreciated. When reading online about Ricks, you'll see people often say that he doesn't have the speed to keep up with fast receivers, but I never once saw him on tape get beat by straight up speed. Anyway, the point of this rep is just to see how easily he gets back into good positioning on the route and plays it perfectly by the book, reading when the receiver prepares to catch the ball, then turning around and making an absolutely insane play on the ball to get the interception. This play is marvelous in technique and raw ability, but it's not the main highlight I even want to show. That would be this play here against UCLA that shows what's, in my opinion, one of the most underrated traits of a corner playing in the NFL, and that's smarts, and playing the coverage that's been called to perfection. This is from Ricks' redshirt sophomore year, and I want to get kind of really deep into the weeds here, so please bear with me as I try to explain this play in its entirety so that you may understand what really does happen here. Most Saban disciples and modern defenses in general rely on having split safety match coverages, basically playing zone coverage with match coverage principles, or even more basically, playing man coverage with specific rules on passing off players in very specific situations. There are two main types of these split safety coverages. The first is what's called the triangle coverage, whereby the defense has 3 defenders over 2 receivers. The second is where the defense has 4 defenders over 3 receivers, and that's what's called a box coverage. The reason why these coverages are called split safety coverages is that there is usually a different coverage being run to each side of each safety, meaning the defense splits the offense into 2 parts right where the ball is snapped from, and the secondary linebackers to the field side have everything to that side, and same for the back side. This is how split safety coverages work in their most basic forms, and there are a million variations and complications to the actual coverages themselves, and if you would like me to dive into that, let me know, but that's a bit outside the scope of this video, so for now, I'm just going to leave it there. Now, the last thing that I would like to explain to you is something called a poach coverage. In a poach coverage, what changes is against a 3-by-1 look from the offense, the backside safety is going to be in the rules for the 3 receiver side instead of the 1 receiver side where they would usually help with the bracket over the top. Poach coverages are designed to remove the possibility of crossers deep into the backside of 3-by-1 alignments from offenses from the most inside receiver. Most poach coverages allow defenses to run a triangle coverage. If you remember what that means, that's a 3/2 coverage on the outside of the strong side, since the backside safety can help on number 3 to the strong side as well. Something to also keep in mind is that the running back in the backfield isn't usually a concern for the defense as far as coverage, since the responsibility to cover him almost always falls on the hook defender, or more simply just the most inside defender on the back 7 of the defense, but the back does cause concern if he does create a 4 strong look. Now, poach coverages are also often called as counters to 4 strong looks from offenses, bringing us back to this play here from the UCLA vs LSU game that I was originally referring to. Here we see a 4 strong look from UCLA with the running back flanking the quarterback to the 3 receiver side and only a tight end to the weak side. So what LSU calls here is a general poach coverage, and they run a triangle coverage to the strong side that's actually a coverage check against a stack like this called tango. In tango, the corner and nickel in this case just play to where the corner takes the first from the stack to go outside, and the nickel plays from the first inside guy, and the safety is over the top, and he's going to help on the deeper of those 2 routes. Now on the backside of this poach coverage, we have a simple man-match principles of poach, where the safety on the backside will help with the strong side number 3 crosser, or if the weak side number 1 goes deep, he's got all of that. So yeah, I hope that basically explains the basics of poach here, because it's kind of essential in order to understand the kind of special play that Eli Ricks makes. So back to Ricks himself here, he's actually going to play the weak side safety role here, since the actual safety is rolled down to get into tight coverage with the tight end. When this play unfolds, we have some sort of play action double post with the tight end coming all the way across on a crossing route. The smarts of Ricks on this play here is how he sits himself right in the throwing window for this ball from the weak side in his poach technique. This is the kind of play where Ricks really shows his enhanced football IQ, and this is a big play that could very easily translate to the NFL. Ricks here shows kind of his smarts, which is something I feel kind of goes overlooked by everyone evaluating him, but not all about Ricks is sunshine and rainbows. If I needed to pinpoint Ricks' biggest flaw, it would be everything that has to do with off coverage and off coverage technique. I said earlier that people say Ricks is slow and that I disagree, but when he's in off coverage, it really does show. The lack of speedy reactions is evident, but it's still something that could be overcome with proper technique. However, that's not really there either. He'll oftentimes undershoot or put himself in positions that are, by his very nature, very aggressive, and then a double move really does beat him. The lack of speed and real reaction ability then shows up when he does get beat, and that's when he gets beat bad. Then again, he really only does get beat from when he's in off coverage. When he's in press, he's basically untouchable. When you're analyzing a possible transition to the NFL for any player or position, you have to analyze every aspect of it, since the NFL is going to push players to be perfect in every one of those aspects. There is no real reality in the NFL where he doesn't get asked to play off coverage, whether it's quarters or cover 3 or cover 6. He has to be able to play in off coverage, and that's why he's kind of a boom or bust guy in my opinion. And to be clear, I haven't mentioned it yet, but to clarify, I do not think that Ricks' floor is busting out. I think that it'll be hanging on the bench and being a really solid backup for the outside corners ahead of him, but I feel like the ceiling on this guy is really taking over in sort of a Sauce Gardner type way. At the end of the day, I really had to dig deep into the film on Ricks to find him getting targeted at all, and that really does speak to his success at just shutting down receivers. I really do think that if you could guarantee to me that Eli Ricks will play every snap in press coverage, I would have no problem drafting him in the first round, and I would have no problem putting some substantial money on him to becoming a Pro Bowler within his first 2 years in the league. I really do believe that. The dude's 6'2" and lanky enough to go toe-to-toe with anyone out there. I really do think that. But these issues he has in off coverage could definitely come out to haunt him if not dealt with correctly, which leads me to my final point. His destination, in my opinion, will control his success completely since he has such a substantial hole he needs to fix. And also, considering that his physical ability can't save him from a perfect technique, the possibility for this issue to compound really quickly should concern anyone drafting him. He's been perfect technique-wise in press, and he needs to get closer to that one in off coverage. A few other things that should be taken into account as well. Eli doesn't have the best history with injuries. He's been injured for a substantial amount of time every season that he's played in, culminating in him only playing 4 games this past year, and that doesn't help obviously to his boomer bust nature. Something else that's kind of secondary, but he did get arrested for marijuana possession and speeding at the beginning of the season, so that's just something to take into account as well. So yeah, I guess that kind of encapsulates my thoughts about Ricks and why I think he has such high upside, but I would love to know what you guys think, and so do let me know down below, and I'll see you next time. But before I go, I just want you all to put what I've said here today in the back of your mind so that when Eli Ricks does go supersonic, you all remember who gave you the tip ahead of time.